Here's a quick introduction to Germany and Russia between 1914 and 1930 for the purposes of looking at German Expressionism and Soviet montage. 1914 to 1918, a period very famously known as the First World War, the war to end all wars, or the Great War. Got to remember this is the first time there'd been any type of major conflagration in Europe since 1815, so nearly 100 years. What was not only that, but the other major thing was the scale of the atrocity or the war itself. We're not talking about just in terms of years, but in terms of numbers. Nothing had ever been seen on this scale before. We're talking about 9 million killed in those 4 years. A number of countries involved, the technology used, the mass slaughter, which was very different to before. In Germany itself, nearly 3 million, nearly a third of those involved in who died during the war had been killed in Germany or were German. And around half the casualties also were from the Russian Empire. So it's an interesting thing to look at, whereby in terms of the two nations that probably suffered the most directly in terms of casualties gave rise to two very interesting types of cinema. In Russia during the up to 1917, it had been run by basically an autocracy with an emperor at the top and some very basic ideas of democracy, but it never really got going. It was basically run by landowners, the aristocracy, the church, the civil service, the army, and that type of thing. And many people were dissatisfied with this, especially more so once the war started and started going badly for the Russian Empire. In 1917, in February, the Tsar steps down, so you effectively get your first revolution, and you get the provisional government being set up, but unfortunately for them, they continue the war, and they were equally as inept. In October 1917, depending on which calendar you use, Lenin and a group of professional revolutionaries take over Petrograd, as St. Petersburg was known at that time, and effectively start the country. This eventually led to the Civil War, which the Reds, the Bolsheviks, won by 1920 and effectively controlled the whole of what became then known as the Soviet Union. Between 1920 and probably about 1929, you get a flourishing of the arts, quite avant-garde types of art, both in film, in terms of sculpture, in terms of architecture, design, all sorts. People were trying and experimenting with all sorts of different ideas, and Lenin was quite happy for that to continue. What you got to understand what the Bolshevik Party was, that it was a communist party. They believed in revolution, the complete change by one group, and the complete overhaul of society and the economy. They wanted to replace the aristocracy and the middle classes with the Bolshevik Party ruling in the name of the working class. They believed they could make the Soviet Union a more equal city. Lenin dies in 1923, and you get a power struggle between 23 and 29 between a number of different factions within the Bolshevik Party. Eventually, Joseph Stalin is the winner of this, and you get a much more repressive state in the 1930s, and a lot of this has a direct effect on the arts, and you see a much more conservative, with a small c, approach to arts, including the films and acting. Germany, on the other hand, also goes through revolution. It loses all, but then the Kaiser, their emperor, steps down, and you get a democratic government set up between 1918 and 1933. This became known as the Weimar government because the constitution was written there, but it had a number of major problems right from the outset. Most people didn't didn't want this type of government because they trusted it, they had much experience of it. In fact, you get at least three attempted revolutions in the first 4 years from the right. You got the Kapp Putsch in 1920 from the left, the Spartacist Rise in 1919, and a little-known group called the Nazis tried to take over in 1923. You've also got other major problems as well, because Germany is devastated, not just in terms of the war dead, but also in terms of casualties coming back, in terms of its economy, in terms of large numbers of people dying because of disease and starvation. It has to pay reparations back to France in 1923, and you get hyperinflation because money becomes worthless as a result of this. And people were, in fact, walking around with 10 million Reichsmark notes, and they were useless. I mean, people prefer to use the paper and give it to the kids to play with. In reaction to World War I, society and culture in the United States elsewhere underwent rapid changes. One of the main thing is new technologies you begin to see, especially in mass culture. You get new types of music, for example, jazz coming through. That's the new thing for all young people to get into. You get cinema coming through. The language of cinema starts to be created in this period. You begin to get radios, people listening to music and speeches and debates for the first time. Mass circulation of newspapers as more and more people could read. This was becoming known as what became known in America as the Roaring Twenties. Another major symbol of this is the beginning of female emancipation. Women were getting the vote in a number of different countries, including Germany. In fact, Germany was one of the first countries to give all women the vote, before even Britain and certainly France. You begin to get new scientific discoveries. For example, Marie Curie and others found the atoms of certain elements spontaneously released charged particles. Einstein argued the measurement of space and time are absolute through the theory of relativity. You've got Italian physicist Enrico Fermi discovered atomic fusion, Scottish scientist Alexander Fleming discovering penicillin, Freud pioneering psychoanalysis, the method of studying how the mind works and treating mental illness. All these have a direct effect on the society and on the arts. In fact, psychoanalysis has a big effect, not just in terms of German cinema, but especially in America. Well, how do you get, what changes do we see? Well, we see the greater interest in abstract art, and we'll see another slideshow a bit later as examples of that, including the Bauhaus and German Expressionists, Dadaists rejecting any type of tradition and just doing anything, almost being like the punks of art. You've got Surrealism, the belief in the unconscious and dreams could have a direct effect on art, and you get to see new types of very functional type of buildings being created by the Bauhaus, design also being affected by that. The war affected economies all over the world. Both Britain and France owe huge war debts. The United States relied on reparation payments from Germany to pay for their loans, leaving the German economy in absolute shambles. And so the direct effect of what I was talking to you about before in terms of the hyperinflation. Thank you.